"Watch your step, Maid." The words dropped like a frozen echo across the marble hallway of the Hawthorne estate, sharp and cutting through the quiet hum of the early morning. Jasmine Carter's eyes flicked up, calm but alert, as she held the mop with both hands, the wet fibers catching the first cold rays of sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Around her, the other nannies shuffled nervously, their faces betraying a mix of fear and irritation as Ethan Hawthorne, the billionaire's 16-year-old son, smirked from the top of the grand staircase, his designer sneakers squeaking lightly on the polished marble steps. A faint shiver ran through the room, not from cold but from the tension that Ethan exuded effortlessly, his presence commanding attention even without words. He flicked his hand dismissively toward the other nannies, a careless gesture that made a stray drop of coffee on the counter jump slightly, and without warning, a small wet sound punctuated the air as he spat, a mocking smirk on his lips, aimed at the three women standing near the entrance. Sarah flinched, Lisa recoiled, Emily gasped quietly, but Jasmine remained poised, her jaw tight and eyes steady as the mop rested lightly against her shoulder. The hallway seemed to hold its breath, the sound of distant chandeliers ticking, the faint hum of the air conditioning, and the soft scrape of the mop on tile all coalesced into a tense silence, every movement magnified in the room that seemed to shrink around them. Jasmine's mind raced briefly, calculating the morning's tasks, noting the precise angle of the light on the granite countertops, the slight wobble of the silver tray Ethan had set down carelessly, and the rhythm of her own heartbeat steadying despite the charged atmosphere. She had been trained, not just in cleaning, but in observing, in noticing the smallest details, in standing tall even when invisible. Today, however, invisibility would not be enough. Ethan's gaze swept the room, lingering on Jasmine, and for a brief moment, his confident smirk faltered as he registered the composed figure in front of him. Jasmine adjusted her stance imperceptibly, feet planted firmly 6 inches apart, weight balanced, eyes forward, mop angled just so, reflecting the sunlight like a sliver of quiet defiance. The other nannies whispered among themselves, glancing at Jasmine with unspoken admiration and relief that at least one of them maintained composure. While Ethan's friends, his 2 older cousins, watched, puzzled, noticing the shift in energy without understanding it. Jasmine took a slow breath, the faint scent of lemon cleaner mingling with the crisp morning air from the open French doors, her hands steady, shoulders relaxed, yet fully alert. A light tap of the mop against the floor echoed softly, barely audible but deliberate, drawing Ethan's attention once more, his brow furrowed slightly, as if sensing a challenge he could not quite name. Time seemed to elongate, each second stretching as he leaned forward on the staircase railing, eyes narrowing, a faint crease forming between his brows, calculating and testing. Jasmine did not move, did not blink excessively, her presence a quiet but firm assertion of control through dignity alone. The other nannies held their collective breath, frozen in the tableau, as the soft scrape of the mop on marble became a metronome of anticipation. Ethan's smirk twitched as he processed the subtle but unmistakable message Jasmine conveyed without a word. She was not like the others, not fearful, not intimidated, and her attention to the room, to detail, to him, was precise and unwavering. The sunlight caught the mop's edge again, glinting, almost like a small signal in the calm before an unseen storm, and Jasmine's lips pressed together softly, silently affirming to herself that this morning, she would not be invisible, she would be recognized, even if only for a fleeting heartbeat, as someone who deserved to be noticed, as someone who carried quiet authority in the midst of chaos. The hallway remained still for a moment after the faint tap of the mop against the marble floor, the sound echoing softly like a heartbeat in a quiet room. Jasmine Carter stood motionless, her gaze steady on Ethan Hawthorne as he slowly descended the staircase, the soft leather of his sneakers whispering against the polished surface. The other nannies shifted slightly, whispering to one another in hushed tones, their voices carrying the weight of unease and curiosity, but Jasmine did not respond. She adjusted her stance imperceptibly, allowing the mop to rest lightly against her side, fingers curled gently around the handle, eyes following every movement Ethan made. Sunlight poured through the tall windows lining the hall, casting long, narrow beams across the polished marble, reflecting off the surfaces of silver trays and the edges of glass vases, creating an interplay of light and shadow that seemed almost to heighten the tension in the room. Ethan paused halfway down the staircase, a faint crease forming between his eyebrows as he regarded Jasmine with a new awareness, the smirk on his face softening into something closer to curiosity. He held the railing loosely with one hand, the other hanging at his side, fingers flexing slightly, as if considering how to react. Jasmine's breathing remained calm, even, a subtle rhythm that seemed to anchor the space around her, giving her presence a quiet authority that contrasted sharply with the nervous energy of the others. The scent of polished wood and lemon cleaner mingled in the air, grounding her in the familiar routine of her work, yet heightening her senses to every detail in the room. A soft breeze from an open French door brushed across the corridor, moving the edges of her uniform just enough to remind her that she was both seen and unseen at the same time. Ethan's eyes shifted slowly, scanning the length of the hallway, noting the precision of her movements, the way her weight was distributed evenly on both feet, the subtle tilt of her head that conveyed alertness without defiance. He adjusted his posture slightly, leaning more forward on the railing, toes brushing the marble lightly, a small sigh escaping his lips as he considered her composure. Jasmine allowed a microsecond of pause before responding with the smallest gesture, tilting the mop head to correct the angle of a stray puddle of water near the base of the staircase, a move that was barely perceptible yet unmistakably deliberate, signaling competence and attention to detail. The room seemed to contract around this small act, the faint scrape of the mop against marble growing more pronounced, the soft creak of leather, the rustle of uniforms, and the distant hum of the air conditioning coalescing into a silent symphony of tension. Ethan's lips pressed together momentarily as he registered the deliberate care in her actions, a subtle acknowledgement that she operated with precision and thoughtfulness. Jasmine's eyes remained fixed forward, calm yet alert, absorbing the spatial dynamics of the corridor, noting the placement of her colleagues, the glint of the handrails, and the slight sway of the curtains, all while maintaining an aura of composed stillness that drew the attention of everyone present without a single word. A distant clock ticked, steadily, marking seconds in a rhythm that seemed to echo the controlled cadence of her breathing, and for a fleeting instant, the bustle of the morning receded entirely, leaving only the tension of observation and anticipation between her and Ethan. The other nannies, though frozen in place, could not help but notice the shift in the energy, the subtle authority Jasmine commanded through poise and presence, a quiet force that contrasted starkly with the flamboyant and volatile behavior they had endured from Ethan. He exhaled softly, the sound barely audible, yet enough to break the taut silence, signaling that he had begun to reassess the assumptions he had made about her, the rigid hierarchy momentarily blurred by the demonstration of her steady and attentive presence. Jasmine's slight adjustment of the mop, the faint tilt of her head, the deliberate positioning of her feet all combined into a silent message. She was competent, unshaken, and observant, a quiet authority that demanded recognition without confrontation, setting the stage for the delicate balance of tension, respect, and anticipation that would unfold in the moments to come. Jasmine Carter's eyes followed Ethan Hawthorne as he finally reached the bottom of the staircase, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the hallway. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible exhale, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the space. The morning sun continued to stream through the high windows, illuminating the polished marble floors and reflecting off the silver handles of the doors lining the corridor, creating patterns of light that danced subtly with each slight movement. Jasmine shifted her weight slightly, adjusting the mop so that its handle leaned comfortably against her shoulder, the fibers brushing lightly against the edge of the floor as if marking her territory silently, a gesture both practical and deliberate. The other nannies whispered quietly among themselves, their voices soft and uncertain, their attention alternating between Ethan and Jasmine, as if anticipating a reaction that could change the flow of the morning entirely. Ethan paused near the center of the hall, his eyes scanning Jasmine with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. The confident smirk that had dominated his expression since the beginning of the encounter softened just a fraction, replaced by a flicker of genuine interest that did not escape her notice. Jasmine's gaze remained steady, unwavering, her posture relaxed yet poised. Each movement measured with an almost imperceptible precision, the slight tilt of her head, the angle of her shoulders, and the even placement of her feet conveying a calm authority without a single word being spoken. The air seemed to hum faintly with the subtle energy of observation and anticipation, the soft scrape of the mop across the marble floor acting as a rhythmic counterpoint to the stillness surrounding them. Jasmine's attention to detail extended beyond the immediate interaction. She noted the position of Ethan's hands, the slight shift of his weight, the faint line of tension across his forehead, and the almost imperceptible narrowing of his eyes, all the while maintaining her own measured composure. A soft draft from the open French doors carried the faint scent of polished wood and fresh linen, brushing across Jasmine's uniform and catching the edges of the mop fibers, a sensory reminder of the environment she controlled with her presence and precision. The other nannies remained frozen, some adjusting their grips on cleaning tools, others shifting weight from one foot to the other, but none dared to speak or make a move, their collective energy absorbed by the silent conversation unfolding between Jasmine and Ethan. He shifted slightly, stepping closer, the polished soles of his sneakers making a soft, barely audible sound against the marble, and Jasmine subtly straightened, the movement so slight it could have been dismissed as posture, yet carried the unmistakable weight of intention and awareness. The faint glint of sunlight on the mop handle caught Ethan's peripheral vision, drawing his eyes briefly, and in that split second, Jasmine allowed herself a gentle micro-smile, just enough to convey confidence without arrogance, a quiet signal that she was fully present and fully aware. The soft ticking of a distant grandfather clock punctuated the room, each beat a silent metronome in the tension-filled space, and Ethan's gaze flicked to it, perhaps unconsciously synchronizing with the rhythm, a subtle grounding against the ripple of unease that had begun to form. Jasmine's fingers lightly tapped the mop handle, a subtle, deliberate gesture that carried the weight of calm observation, and Ethan noticed, his brow raising slightly as he registered that the small, precise action was deliberate, purposeful, and indicative of a focused mind that did not waver under scrutiny. The whisper of movement from the other nannies, the faint rustle of fabric, the small glimmer of reflection from the polished surfaces, all combined to form a quiet symphony of anticipation, a delicate tension that seemed to stretch and hold the moment in perfect balance. Jasmine's eyes met Ethan's directly, unwavering, as if silently communicating that she understood the dynamics at play, that she saw beyond the surface of the morning, beyond the smirk, beyond the small acts of attention, and into the core of the observation itself, asserting her quiet authority with every measured breath and subtle gesture. Jasmine Carter's attention shifted subtly as Ethan Hawthorne's gaze lingered longer than expected, the afternoon light spilling across the corridor and casting a soft glow on the gleaming marble floors. The reflective surfaces caught fragments of their figures, stretching and bending the space between them, and for a moment, the world outside the hallway seemed to dissolve, leaving only the quiet exchange of observation and awareness. Jasmine adjusted the mop in her hand, the slight movement deliberate, precise, each fiber brushing gently against the floor as if tracing a pattern that only she could read, signaling competence and confidence. Ethan shifted slightly, his posture relaxing fractionally, yet maintaining an undercurrent of curiosity, his eyes narrowing just enough to convey a new assessment forming in his mind. The other nannies remained frozen, some gripping their cleaning tools a little tighter, their whispers reduced to almost inaudible murmurs, all drawn to the subtle dynamic unfolding between Jasmine and Ethan. The faint creak of the floorboards beneath their feet, the distant tick of a grandfather clock, and the soft hum of the air conditioning created a symphony of understated tension that filled the hallway, emphasizing every measured step, every micro-expression, and every controlled breath. Jasmine took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of lemon cleaner and polished wood mingling with the warm sunlight, grounding her even as her senses remained heightened to the movements of everyone around her. Ethan's brow furrowed just slightly as he processed her calm precision. The way she moved with purpose yet without haste, the gentle tilt of her head, and the measured placement of her feet conveying authority without confrontation. A subtle shift in the angle of the mop handle, the faint adjustment of her stance, and the controlled, quiet strength in her posture all combined to communicate a message far more powerful than any words. She was present, attentive, and unshakable. The interplay of light and shadow on the walls and floor accentuated the tension in the space, highlighting the contrast between Jasmine's composed presence and the restless energy of the other nannies, their nervous glances and whispered comments serving only to amplify the quiet command she exuded. Ethan leaned slightly forward, one hand brushing against the polished railing, the other resting loosely at his side, as if contemplating the unexpected poise he had encountered, the slight crease in his forehead signaling a mind engaging in a new calculation, one that did not rely on assumptions or habitual superiority. Jasmine's gaze remained fixed, unwavering, as she observed the subtle changes in his stance, the slight hesitation in his expression, and the shifting weight of his shoulders, all without breaking her own rhythm or focus. The soft tap of the mop against the marble echoed once, a punctuation in the otherwise silent dialogue of presence and recognition, and Ethan's eyes followed it instinctively, the motion drawing his attention to her deliberate and thoughtful movements. In the distance, the sunlight glinted off a handrail, catching his eye for a moment, and Jasmine used the brief distraction to allow a micro-expression of calm assurance to pass across her face, a signal that she was both fully aware and fully capable. The other nannies, though still tense, began to register the subtle shift in the energy of the hallway, the quiet influence Jasmine commanded by simply being fully present and attentive, a demonstration of authority born from skill and poise rather than status or loud assertion. The ambient sounds of the estate, the faint echo of footsteps on marble, the hum of distant machinery, and the soft rustle of fabric blended together, framing the silent, almost imperceptible conversation occurring through posture, gesture, and awareness between Jasmine and Ethan, setting the stage for the next moment in their carefully choreographed morning. Jasmine Carter's mind focused intently on the small details of the hallway, each step of Ethan Hawthorne drawing her attention to the subtle shifts in his posture, the faint change in the angle of his shoulders, the way his shadow stretched across the marble floor, following every glint of sunlight that broke through the tall windows. She adjusted her mop handle slightly, not as a correction but as a subtle signal of attentiveness, the fibers brushing lightly against the polished floor, leaving a trail of gentle streaks that caught the light and reflected her presence in a quiet, deliberate way. Ethan paused near a side doorway, glancing down at the tray he had inadvertently left slightly askew, and Jasmine's eyes followed the movement, noting the tilt of the silver surface and the angle of the glassware stacked on it. Her breath remained steady, controlled, the scent of lemon cleaner and polished wood grounding her while her senses remained alert to every motion, every expression, every soft echo of sound in the expansive hallway. The other nannies shifted uneasily, some brushing imaginary dust from their uniforms, others adjusting their grips on cleaning tools, their whispered exchanges fading into the background as Jasmine maintained her focus, her posture and gaze conveying calm authority without a single spoken word. Ethan's eyes narrowed ever so slightly as he observed her, registering the precision in her stance, the subtle yet deliberate positioning of her feet, and the careful angle at which she held the mop, each movement reinforcing her competence and composure. A faint breeze from an open French door stirred the hem of her uniform, catching the light and emphasizing the deliberate control she maintained over her presence and actions. The marble floor reflected fragments of their images, elongating the hallway and magnifying the small, quiet power dynamic between them, every detail magnified by the sunlight catching edges of surfaces, casting long shadows that seemed to frame Jasmine in a soft glow of quiet command. Ethan shifted, one hand resting lightly on the polished railing, the other at his side, fingers flexing subtly as he considered the unexpected poise of the young maid, a slight crease forming in his brow as he measured her composure and attentiveness against the flurry of morning activity and the nervous energy of the other nannies. Jasmine's eyes remained fixed on him, unwavering, absorbing the tension in the room, registering the faintest twitch of his lips, the subtle lift of an eyebrow, the almost imperceptible change in his breathing, all while maintaining her own calm, deliberate rhythm. The tap of the mop against the marble created a soft counterpoint to the silence, a measured sound that seemed to punctuate the observation between them, reinforcing her presence and the careful consideration she applied to every movement. Ethan's gaze followed the slight motions, his smirk softened, replaced by a flicker of genuine curiosity and quiet recognition that she was fully aware, fully capable, and not to be underestimated. The soft murmur of the other nannies, the shuffle of feet, the gentle rustle of fabric, all combined with the ambient sound of air flowing through the high windows to frame a delicate, tension-filled moment of silent appraisal and mutual recognition. Jasmine's subtle shift of the mop, the careful adjustment of her stance, and the controlled grace in her posture communicated an authority rooted in attentiveness and skill, quietly challenging Ethan's assumptions and setting the stage for a new balance of awareness and respect that hung delicately in the sunlight-filled hallway. Each micro-movement, each measured glance, each subtle breath built a cadence of observation and response, a rhythm that resonated in the polished marble and echoed softly through the corridor, a quiet testament to Jasmine's poised competence and the beginning of a subtle shift in Ethan's perception, as he considered the depth and steadiness of her presence in contrast to the nervous uncertainty of everyone else nearby. Jasmine Carter took a careful, measured step forward, letting her eyes sweep across the length of the hallway. Noticing the faint smudge on the polished marble where Ethan Hawthorne's sneakers had paused, the way the sunlight glinted against the edges of a silver tray she had adjusted earlier, and the subtle reflection of the open French doors casting a soft glow along the walls. She allowed the mop to rest lightly against her shoulder, the fibers brushing against the floor with the quiet precision of a practiced hand, a silent demonstration of competence that contrasted with the nervous energy of the other nannies clustered near the entrance. Ethan's gaze followed her movements, lingering on the slight tilt of her head, the even placement of her feet, and the controlled way she held the mop, each gesture deliberate and infused with calm awareness. The room felt suspended, the distant hum of air conditioning, the soft tick of a wall clock, and the faint echo of their footfalls creating a rhythm that underscored the tension in the air. Jasmine noticed the subtle shift in Ethan's posture, the faint narrowing of his eyes, and the softening of the smirk that had dominated his expression all morning, recognizing that her presence and measured actions had begun to alter his perception. The other nannies, still frozen in place, glanced at one another with muted astonishment, sensing a change in the dynamic without fully understanding it, their whispers fading to silence as the quiet dialogue of observation and awareness continued to unfold between Jasmine and Ethan. A soft breeze from the open doors rustled the edges of her uniform, the fibers of the mop brushing lightly against the marble, the combination of sound and movement creating a subtle, deliberate pattern that drew Ethan's attention in a way that was both commanding and understated. Jasmine's breathing remained calm, even, a gentle rhythm that anchored the space around her, while her eyes tracked every small shift in Ethan's stance, the angle of his shoulders, the micro-movement of his hands, and the quiet strength in the way he held himself, all while she remained composed and attentive. The light from the windows highlighted the reflections on the polished floors and the gleaming surfaces of silver handles, casting a soft illumination across Jasmine's features and accentuating the quiet determination in her eyes. Ethan shifted slightly, his sneakers making a subtle, almost imperceptible sound against the marble, drawing Jasmine's attention to the faint crease in his brow and the subtle tension in his jaw as he processed the precision and poise she exuded. The hallway seemed to expand and contract with each movement, the interplay of light and shadow accentuating the silent energy and the careful balance of observation between them. Jasmine's posture remained impeccable, the micro-adjustments of her stance, the slight flexing of her fingers around the mop handle, and the controlled alignment of her weight on both feet, all communicating authority without the need for words, an understated declaration of presence that Ethan could not ignore. The distant hum of machinery, the gentle echo of movement across marble, and the soft rustle of fabric all blended together, creating a backdrop that emphasized the subtle, powerful tension building in the space. Jasmine's steady, deliberate gaze met Ethan's once more, unwavering and composed, each silent exchange between them carrying weight, a quiet understanding forming that bridged the gap between observation and acknowledgement, setting the stage for a shift that would be recognized not through speech, but through the subtle, powerful language of attention, poise, and controlled presence. Jasmine Carter stood her ground, mop in hand, the fibers brushing lightly against the gleaming marble as she observed Ethan Hawthorne's subtle shift in expression, his smirk softening into a flicker of uncertainty as the sunlight caught the edges of his sneakers and reflected along the corridor. The hallway, stretching long and silent around them, seemed to pause with the tension, every polished surface amplifying the faint sounds of shifting weight, the soft swish of fabric, and the distant tick of a clock high on the wall. Jasmine's posture remained impeccable, shoulders squared, back straight, eyes steady, conveying an unspoken confidence that contrasted sharply with the nervous energy of the other nannies gathered near the entrance, their whispers now hushed, as if recognizing the quiet authority she radiated. Ethan's gaze lingered, moving over the deliberate tilt of her head, the precise placement of her feet, and the subtle micro-adjustments in her stance, each small gesture a testament to her attention and composure. The sunlight streamed in at an angle, illuminating the floor in patterns that shifted with the movement of the corridor, reflecting fragments of their images, elongating the space, and creating a visual rhythm that emphasized the silent dance of observation and appraisal between them. Jasmine allowed herself a controlled breath, inhaling the faint scent of lemon cleaner mixed with polished wood, a grounding presence that matched the measured cadence of her thoughts, and her eyes caught a slight imperfection on the silver tray she had adjusted earlier, a detail most would have overlooked, but one she had corrected with subtle precision. Ethan shifted his weight, the soft whisper of his sneakers on marble breaking the heavy quiet, and for a fraction of a moment, the confident facade he maintained throughout the morning faltered, replaced by a genuine curiosity and tentative recognition of her calm efficiency. Jasmine's gaze never wavered, following the micro-movements of his shoulders and hands, noting the subtle shift of his posture and the fleeting crease that appeared between his brows, all while maintaining her own rhythm, a quiet yet unmistakable demonstration of authority in the otherwise static hallway. The other nannies, sensing the change, began to absorb the new energy, their own tension easing slightly as they witnessed Jasmine's measured poise and the effect it had on Ethan, a visual lesson in composed presence and understated competence. A soft breeze moved through the corridor from an open French door, stirring the edges of her uniform, the fibers of the mop catching the light, as if signaling a gentle declaration of focus and awareness. Jasmine shifted the mop handle just slightly, a deliberate adjustment that seemed minor but drew Ethan's attention, highlighting the precision of her movements and the thoughtfulness behind each gesture. The distant hum of machinery and the echo of their presence on the polished marble merged into a quiet rhythm, accentuating the subtle tension and anticipation in the air. Ethan's eyes softened, the slight narrowing of his gaze replaced with a contemplative pause, registering the deliberate, unwavering attention Jasmine projected through posture, gesture, and the careful cadence of her movements. Jasmine held his gaze steadily, letting the silence speak for her competence, the careful balance of observation and controlled action creating a dialogue without words, each micro-movement a testament to skill, awareness, and calm authority. The sunlight highlighted the gentle reflections along the floor and walls, emphasizing the contrast between Jasmine's poised, deliberate presence and the subtle uncertainty settling across Ethan's features, a silent acknowledgement forming that would shift the energy of the room. In this extended pause, every subtle shift of weight, every controlled breath, and every calculated movement contributed to a growing recognition, an unspoken understanding forming that would set the stage for the moments to follow, a quiet but powerful negotiation of respect and acknowledgement unfolding entirely through presence, observation, and unbroken composure. Jasmine Carter felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere as Ethan Hawthorne took a slow step closer, the soft echo of his polished sneakers against the marble drawing her attention without breaking her composed stance. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows scattered across the floor, highlighting the edges of the silver tray she had straightened moments ago and casting delicate shadows along the walls, the interplay of light and reflection making the hallway appear almost suspended in time. She allowed the mop to rest lightly against her shoulder, the fibers brushing gently against the marble, each movement precise, deliberate, and measured, conveying attentiveness without a single spoken word. Ethan's eyes followed the motion, narrowing slightly, registering the quiet authority she projected through controlled posture, the subtle tilt of her head, the even placement of her feet, and the calm rhythm of her breathing. The other nannies remained still, their hushed whispers fading entirely as they watched the silent dialogue unfolding between Jasmine and Ethan, the tension in the air thick yet contained, each micro-movement amplified by the reflective surfaces of the polished hallway. Jasmine's gaze remained fixed on Ethan, steady and unwavering, capturing the micro-expressions on his face, the softening of his smirk, the faint crease of concentration between his brows, the careful consideration in the set of his jaw, and allowing her awareness to subtly influence the energy of the room. The faint hum of the air conditioning, the gentle ticking of a distant wall clock, and the soft rustle of uniforms created a background rhythm that punctuated the stillness, emphasizing the delicate balance of power and observation between them. Jasmine shifted the mop handle ever so slightly, a movement so subtle it could have been mistaken for adjustment, yet it carried the full weight of intent, drawing Ethan's attention to the controlled precision in her actions, the kind that required focus, patience, and experience to maintain. The sunlight caught the mop fibers, reflecting a small glimmer across the floor, and Jasmine used the light to anchor her presence visually, the corridor stretching out behind her like a stage set, every reflection and shadow adding dimension to the silent conversation of posture, movement, and awareness. Ethan leaned slightly forward, the soft pressure of his hand against the railing conveying curiosity, caution, and a flicker of respect, all without a single word, while Jasmine maintained her calm, deliberate stance, her shoulders squared, spine straight, and eyes level, a picture of quiet confidence that could not be ignored. The other nannies, though still watching, began to absorb the subtle shift, their own tension easing slightly as they recognized the power in Jasmine's composure and the unspoken authority she commanded through focus, observation, and controlled action. A gentle draft from an open French door brushed across Jasmine's uniform, carrying with it the faint scent of polished wood and lemon cleaner, accentuating the controlled stillness of her posture and the precision of her movements. The soft tap of the mop against the floor echoed faintly, a rhythm in sync with the heartbeat of the space, marking each second of anticipation as Ethan studied her carefully, his smirk replaced by a subtle, contemplative expression that acknowledged the competence and poise before him. Jasmine held his gaze firmly, her calm awareness communicating without words, every micro-adjustment of her posture, every slight tilt of her head, every measured breath reinforcing her presence and the quiet authority she exuded, the hallway itself seeming to respond to the deliberate rhythm of their shared awareness, setting the stage for the subtle but undeniable shift in respect that had begun to take root between them. Jasmine Carter felt the subtle shift in energy as Ethan Hawthorne stepped slightly closer, the polished marble floor beneath his sneakers reflecting the morning sunlight and amplifying every faint sound in the long corridor. The hallway, lined with tall windows, glowed softly, sunlight catching the edges of silver trays, glass vases, and the polished handrails, creating a rhythm of light and shadow that mirrored the unspoken tension between them. Jasmine adjusted her mop in a precise, measured movement, the fibers gliding across the marble with the softest of brushes, signaling attentiveness, control, and calm authority without a single word spoken. Ethan's eyes followed each micro-movement, noticing the deliberate tilt of her head, the even distribution of her weight on both feet, and the subtle flexing of her fingers around the mop handle, registering the quiet competence in every detail. The other nannies, frozen in place moments before, shifted slightly, their whispers subdued, their attention drawn entirely to the interaction unfolding silently before them, the tension of expectation and observation thick in the air. Jasmine's gaze remained steady, her calm breathing providing a rhythm that grounded the space, allowing her to absorb the faintest changes in Ethan's expression, the softening of his smirk, the brief crease of concentration between his brows, the subtle adjustment of his posture, and respond with an imperceptible shift of stance, each micromotion conveying awareness and confidence. The soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant ticking of a wall clock, and the faint echo of footsteps created a layered background that highlighted the stillness of her presence, the precision in her movements, and the impact of quiet composure in contrast to the restless energy of others. A gentle breeze drifted through the open French doors, rustling the edges of Jasmine's uniform and catching the light on the mop fibers, emphasizing the deliberate control she maintained over her environment and her actions. Ethan's hand brushed lightly along the railing, his gaze lingering on her measured motions, his initial smirk replaced by a tentative, contemplative expression as he considered her poise and attentiveness. Jasmine's stance remained impeccable, shoulders squared, spine straight, eyes level, every subtle adjustment of her posture communicating authority and competence without confrontation. The reflective surfaces of the marble and polished wood amplified the micro moments of movement, light, and shadow, framing Jasmine's presence in a soft, deliberate glow that drew Ethan's focus and held it, highlighting the contrast between her composed demeanor and the uncertainty settling subtly across his features. The faint tap of the mop echoed gently against the floor, a quiet rhythm that punctuated the tension in the corridor and underscored the silent negotiation occurring entirely through presence, posture, and micro-expression. Jasmine's eyes met Ethan's directly, unflinching, conveying awareness, skill, and quiet command, while the ambient light, reflective surfaces, and subdued background sounds combined to create a corridor charged with anticipation, observation, and a growing recognition of the understated power she held in that moment. Every micro-movement, every controlled breath, and every subtle shift of weight contributed to an almost imperceptible dialogue between them, a silent exchange that carried far more meaning than words could, establishing a nuanced tension and mutual acknowledgement that set the stage for the unfolding recognition, understanding, and respect that lingered quietly in the sunlight-filled hallway. Jasmine Carter noticed a subtle shift in the rhythm of the hallway as Ethan Hawthorne paused mid-step, the polished marble under his sneakers reflecting the morning light and the faint shadows of the tall windows. The soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant ticking of the wall clock became the backdrop for a quiet, almost imperceptible change in the energy of the space. Jasmine's hands remained steady on the mop handle, her posture impeccable, shoulders squared, feet evenly planted, every micro-adjustment deliberate and controlled, a subtle signal of her focus and attentiveness. Ethan's gaze lingered, taking in the deliberate precision of her stance, the gentle tilt of her head, the quiet determination in her eyes, and the unspoken competence conveyed through her controlled movements. The other nannies, still standing at the edges of the corridor, watched in silent fascination, their whispers completely stilled by the tension and awareness that Jasmine radiated without speaking a word. A soft draft from the open French doors stirred her uniform and brushed lightly against the mop fibers, catching the light in a subtle glimmer that emphasized her presence and the quiet command she held over the environment. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, leaning on the polished railing, his hands flexing subtly, his brow creased as he processed the poise, confidence, and precision Jasmine exhibited, recognizing for the first time that her composure was not passive but deliberate and meaningful. Jasmine's gaze remained fixed, calm, and unwavering, taking in every small movement, every flicker of expression, and every subtle shift in posture from Ethan, a silent dialogue of awareness and understanding passing between them. The sunlight illuminated the corridor in long, soft beams, reflecting off the marble floors, silver handles, and glass surfaces, creating patterns of light that danced gently across the walls, framing Jasmine in a quiet glow that drew Ethan's attention and held it, emphasizing the contrast between her composed authority and the tentative curiosity that had begun to replace his initial smirk. The soft tap of the mop against the floor echoed gently, marking the passage of time and reinforcing the rhythm of controlled observation and attentiveness that Jasmine maintained, a subtle but unmistakable declaration of presence. Ethan's eyes shifted as he observed the small but deliberate adjustments in her stance and the way she managed the space around her, the micro-movements of her body and the careful positioning of the mop communicating a calm and steady authority that he had not anticipated encountering. The hallway seemed to hold its breath, every reflective surface amplifying the quiet power of their shared observation, the distant sounds of movement, hum, and ticking fading into the background as the attention centered on the silent exchange of presence, awareness, and respect. Jasmine's subtle posture shifts, the controlled rhythm of her breath, and the careful alignment of her weight on both feet created a visual cadence that Ethan could not ignore, a slow realization forming that her capability, composure, and attentiveness set her apart from the others, demanding recognition without confrontation. The polished marble, the sunlight streaming in, and the soft echo of their presence combined to form an almost tangible tension, a quiet but undeniable acknowledgement of skill and poise that hung in the hallway, marking the moment as a turning point in the subtle power dynamic between Jasmine and Ethan, the room itself seeming to respond to the deliberate rhythm, awareness, and composed confidence she exuded. Jasmine Carter felt a subtle tension shift in the hallway as Ethan Hawthorne took a half step back, the polished marble beneath his sneakers catching the sunlight and reflecting faint glimmers onto the walls. He ran a hand through his hair, a small exhale escaping his lips as he processed the quiet authority Jasmine had maintained throughout the morning, her composed presence standing in stark contrast to the flurry of nervous energy from the other nannies still lingering near the doorway. The sunlight illuminated the edges of silver trays, glass vases, and polished handrails, casting delicate lines of light and shadow across the corridor that seemed to emphasize the careful choreography of attention and awareness Jasmine had orchestrated with her posture, movement, and subtle gestures. Jasmine adjusted the mop slightly, letting the fibers brush lightly against the floor in a movement so precise and deliberate that it seemed to resonate across the polished surface, a silent signal of competence and calm that drew Ethan's gaze once more. The distant hum of the air conditioning and the soft tick of a wall clock underscored the silent dialogue unfolding in the space, each micro-movement and measured breath punctuating the awareness between them. Ethan's eyes lingered on the way she held the mop, the tilt of her head, and the even placement of her feet, registering the quiet confidence that came from focus, experience, and attentiveness, qualities he had underestimated in the moments prior. Jasmine's gaze remained steady, unwavering, as she observed the micro-expressions on Ethan's face, the brief narrowing of his eyes, the subtle relaxation of his shoulders, the softening of his smirk, and allowed the quiet strength in her posture and presence to speak for itself. The other nannies watched with muted astonishment, their nervous whispers fading entirely, replaced by the almost tangible energy that Jasmine exuded without a single word, commanding attention and quiet respect. A gentle breeze drifted through the open French doors, rustling her uniform and causing a soft glint to catch on the mop fibers, a visual punctuation that emphasized her calm composure and attentive awareness. Ethan shifted slightly, his hand brushing lightly along the railing, the subtle movement reflecting his growing acknowledgement of Jasmine's steady presence and the effect her composure had on the space. Jasmine's posture, balanced and precise, conveyed an authority that was observed and recognized silently, every small motion and controlled breath reinforcing the respect she had earned through patience, observation, and quiet competence. The sunlight continued to stream across the marble, reflecting fragments of both figures and amplifying the subtle power dynamic between them, the corridor alive with the silent exchange of awareness, focus, and recognition. Each tap of the mop against the floor, each micro-adjustment of her stance, and each deliberate breath contributed to the rhythm of the space, a quiet assertion of skill and presence that held Ethan's attention fully. The polished surfaces, interplay of light and shadow, and ambient sounds created a suspended moment, a tableau in which every detail mattered, highlighting Jasmine's poise, and the growing recognition of her authority and calm strength. Ethan's gaze softened, his earlier smirk replaced with a contemplative acknowledgement, a realization that her presence, her careful actions, and her unwavering focus had shifted the perception in the room, establishing a subtle but undeniable balance of awareness and respect between them. The quiet authority she demonstrated now acknowledged in the reflection of sunlight along the marble floor and in the subtle changes of his posture and expression. Jasmine Carter allowed a faint, controlled exhale as Ethan Hawthorne's expression shifted, the brief crease of concentration between his brows softening into a subtle, contemplative acknowledgement of the composure and attention she had maintained. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows caught the polished marble, the reflections tracing intricate patterns along the floor and walls, emphasizing the deliberate, quiet rhythm of her movements and the precise alignment of her stance. Jasmine's mop rested lightly against her shoulder, the fibers brushing gently against the surface with a deliberate, measured motion that reinforced her calm authority, her presence commanding attention without a single word being spoken. Ethan's gaze lingered, following the careful tilt of her head, the poised distribution of weight on her feet, and the subtle flexing of her fingers around the handle, each micro-movement conveying awareness, focus, and competence that had quietly shifted the balance of the hallway. The other nannies observed from the edges, their nervous whispers dissolved into silence, replaced by the subtle tension and awe of witnessing Jasmine's quiet command over the space, each subtle gesture radiating patience and confidence that contrasted with their own uncertainty. A soft breeze drifted through the open French doors, catching the edges of her uniform and brushing against the mop fibers, the sunlight reflecting briefly on the fibers in a fleeting glimmer that emphasized the deliberateness of her actions and the focused control she maintained over the environment. Ethan shifted slightly, one hand resting on the polished railing, his other hanging loosely at his side, and for a moment, his eyes softened, recognizing in her movements a precision, patience, and poise that he had not expected, a quiet mastery that went unnoticed by many yet impossible to ignore in that moment. Jasmine's gaze remained unwavering, her calm breathing, slight shifts of stance, and subtle adjustments of posture creating a rhythm of silent authority that drew the hallway's energy into a quiet orbit around her, influencing the space without assertion or loud gesture. The faint tap of the mop against the marble punctuated the stillness, a measured sound echoing gently, aligning with the subtle awareness and attention that dominated the corridor, reinforcing the shift in perception that had begun to take hold in Ethan's mind. The polished floors, the reflective silver handles, and the sunlight catching edges of every surface amplified the quiet impact of her presence, framing the exchange not in words but in observation, posture, and poise. Ethan's shoulders relaxed fractionally, the subtle tension in his stance giving way to a hesitant acknowledgement of Jasmine's composure, her careful, deliberate actions creating a microcosm of respect and recognition within the sunlit hallway. Jasmine maintained her rhythm, every motion calculated yet seemingly effortless, the faintest adjustments in stance, tilt of the head, and alignment of the mop reinforcing her awareness and reinforcing the quiet authority she radiated. The other nannies, sensing the shift, relaxed slightly, absorbing the subtle influence Jasmine exerted simply by being fully present, attentive, and poised. Light danced softly along the polished surfaces, casting fleeting reflections that mirrored the careful balance of power and recognition, emphasizing that her quiet competence had left an unmistakable impression. Ethan's gaze softened further, the slight shift of his expression signaling a growing acknowledgement of Jasmine's skill, calm, and unspoken authority, the room itself seeming to recognize the change as the hallway became a space defined by observation, respect, and measured presence, where every subtle gesture, glance, and breath had contributed to a profound shift in awareness and understanding between them. Jasmine Carter stepped lightly toward the open French doors at the end of the hallway, the sunlight pouring in and casting long, warm streaks across the polished marble floor, reflecting softly against the silver handles and the edges of the glass vases that lined the corridor. Ethan Hawthorne paused behind her, the subtle relaxation in his posture a quiet acknowledgement of the composure she had maintained, his his sneakers resting lightly on the marble, echoing faintly in the space as he considered the calm authority she had projected without a single word. The other nannies remained near the entrance, their whispers now gone entirely, observing the exchange. With quiet awe as Jasmine's presence subtly reshaped the energy in the hallway, each deliberate movement reinforcing her careful attentiveness and understated command. Jasmine adjusted the mop lightly against the floor, brushing the fibers in a controlled motion that left a soft, almost imperceptible trail across the marble, a rhythm of motion that mirrored the slow, deliberate cadence of her breathing. Each inhale and exhale measured and calm, grounding the space around her. Sunlight glinted across the mop fibers, reflecting in delicate flashes along the floor, a visual punctuation to the quiet authority she carried through posture, gaze, and poise, drawing Ethan's attention in a way that commanded respect without confrontation. Ethan's brow relaxed further, the faint crease in his forehead smoothing as he observed the careful alignment of her feet, the subtle tilt of her head, and the micro-adjustments in her stance, registering the deliberate and confident attention she had given to every detail of the hallway, the polished surfaces, and the objects around them. Jasmine's eyes remained steady, unwavering, holding his gaze just long enough to communicate awareness, skill, and quiet strength, the silent language of controlled movement and presence forming a dialogue between them that required no words. The ambient sounds, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the gentle tick of the clock, the faint rustle of uniforms, faded to a background murmur, accentuating the deliberate motions of Jasmine and the attentive observation of Ethan as the subtle tension transformed into a mutual recognition of composure and respect. She shifted the mop handle slightly, a micromotion so subtle it might have gone unnoticed, yet its precision emphasized the control and intention behind every gesture she made, reinforcing the quiet authority she projected and the influence it had on the perception of everyone in the hallway. Ethan stepped closer, each movement deliberate yet unhurried, his eyes tracing the lines of light and shadow that illuminated Jasmine's form, noting the quiet confidence that had quietly asserted itself in contrast to the nervous energy of the other nannies, a realization settling that her competence and focus deserved acknowledgement. The corridor seemed to hold its breath, the interplay of sunlight and reflective surfaces amplifying the weight of the moment, each polished reflection emphasizing the measured presence and meticulous care Jasmine had exercised throughout the morning. Jasmine turned just slightly, the soft glint of sunlight catching her eyes, a subtle, knowing expression passing across her features that conveyed calm confidence and quiet mastery of the space, a silent invitation for recognition of the effort and attentiveness she had demonstrated. Ethan's lips parted slightly in the faintest acknowledgement, a soft exhale and a gentle shift of his shoulders signaling the internal reflection that had taken root, a recognition that Jasmine's steady, deliberate presence had quietly shifted the balance, earned attention, and transformed the energy of the hallway. The other nannies absorbed the subtle shift, sensing the unspoken authority Jasmine had claimed through her awareness, posture, and controlled movements, the sunlight tracing her figure on the polished marble like a final, soft spotlight on the quiet mastery she had displayed. Jasmine allowed herself a small, controlled nod, just enough to acknowledge the silent dialogue, the balance of respect now fully established, every movement, glance, and measured breath reinforcing the profound shift that had occurred, the warm sunlight casting a glow that seemed to affirm the quiet, deliberate power she had earned and maintained throughout the morning, leaving the hallway settled in a calm, reflective stillness that carried the weight of recognition, awareness, and composed presence.